It was supposed to be a quick stop at a small convenience store, a routine task before the day's responsibilities resumed. Elena Carter walked in confidently, her posture and demeanor reflecting someone who commanded respect. She moved through the aisles with quiet purpose, selecting a bottle of water and a snack for the long hours ahead. However, what should have been an ordinary moment was about to turn into something far more sinister. As she approached the counter, the atmosphere shifted. A uniformed officer, Detective Ryan Mitchell, stood near the coffee machine, casually sipping from his cup. The moment his gaze landed on Elena, suspicion flickered across his face. His eyes narrowed, scanning her from head to toe, his expression hardening with quiet contempt. There was no reason for his scrutiny. Elena had done nothing wrong. Yet, in his mind, assumptions took shape, twisting into something ugly. He stepped forward, blocking her path to the cashier. "Hold on," he said, his voice thick with authority. "What are you doing here?" Elena, unfazed, met his gaze with calm defiance. "Buying a drink, like everyone else." Detective Mitchell smirked, his tone dripping with condescension. "Funny. You don't look like you belong in a place like this. What are you really up to?" A heavy silence fell over the store. The cashier hesitated, his hands faltering over the register. Other customers stole quick glances, sensing the tension but unsure whether to intervene. Elena placed her items on the counter, her voice unwavering. "If you'll excuse me, I don't owe you an explanation." But Mitchell wasn't done. The confrontation had just begun. What happens next will shock everyone in the store and change both of their lives forever. Stay with us to see how this confrontation unfolds. Elena remained calm, but every muscle in her body tensed as she felt Detective Mitchell's piercing gaze. His stance was rigid, shoulders squared, his authority emanating from him like a silent threat. "You think you can just walk in here like you own the place?" he continued, his voice now quieter but even more dangerous. "People like you always think the rules don't apply to them." Elena took a slow breath, controlling the anger bubbling beneath her calm exterior. She had dealt with men like him before, those who wielded power not to protect, but to control. Any sign of defiance could push him over the edge, yet she refused to let fear dictate her actions. "I don't know what you think I've done," she said evenly, "but this is harassment, plain and simple." A dry chuckle escaped Mitchell's lips. "Harassment? You've got some nerve," he muttered. Before she could react, his hand shot out, gripping her arm with unnecessary force. Gasps filled the store as a bottle from a nearby shelf crashed to the ground. A woman near the entrance, an older lady in a navy coat clutching her purse, let out a startled cry. "Hey! What's going on?" A deep voice cut through the tension. Elena turned her head slightly. A man, likely in his mid-40s, stood near the refrigerated section, his brow furrowed in concern. Other customers were watching now, their whispers growing louder. "This doesn't concern you," Mitchell snapped, without even turning to look. The man took a step forward. "It does, when I see a cop manhandling someone for no reason." Mitchell's grip on Elena's arm tightened, as if trying to assert his dominance before things spiraled out of control. "Back off," he growled. "This is police business." Elena's pulse pounded in her ears, but she steadied herself. She met Mitchell's glare head-on, her voice sharp as steel. "You have no right to touch me." Mitchell clenched his jaw, his nostrils flaring. "I have every right," he hissed, his face inches from hers. The older woman near the entrance fumbled with her phone. I think someone should call the police," she stammered. Mitchell's eyes flickered toward her, momentarily distracted. That 1 second of hesitation would change everything. Elena's pulse pounded in her ears as the store fell into stunned silence. Mitchell's grip on her arm tightened, his fingers like iron shackles digging into her skin. The weight of his authority loomed over the room, daring anyone to intervene. The man near the refrigerators took another step forward, his jaw tight with frustration. "Let her go, officer. You're out of control." Mitchell shot him a withering glare. "Step back, now, unless you want to be part of the problem." Elena's heart raced, but she kept her expression unreadable. She had been in high-pressure situations before, but there was something different about this one, something volatile. Mitchell wasn't just exerting his power. He was desperate to prove something. "You have no reason to detain me," she said evenly, her voice controlled but firm. "You're making a mistake." Mitchell leaned in, his breath hot against her ear. "No, the mistake was thinking you could walk in here and act like you belong." A collective gasp rippled through the store. The older woman near the entrance fumbled with her phone, her hands shaking. I think we should call someone," she stammered. Then it happened. With a sharp, violent jerk, Mitchell yanked Elena backward, sending her stumbling. But she wasn't the only one who moved. Before she could react, the man near the refrigerators lunged forward. "Get your hands off her!" he roared. The impact was instant. He shoved Mitchell back, forcing the officer to release his grip. Elena barely caught her balance as the store erupted into chaos. Mitchell's hand flew to his holster, and for a split second, the world slowed. Number Elena's instincts kicked in. Without hesitation, she dropped low, pivoting sharply, sweeping her leg under Mitchell's feet. His balance wavered, and before he could draw his weapon, he went crashing to the ground, his head smacking against the tile floor. The store went silent. Mitchell groaned, dazed, struggling to push himself up. The cashier stood frozen, his fingers hovering over the register. The older woman gasped. The man who had intervened stared, wide-eyed. And then a sound cut through the silence. The jingle of the entrance bell. A second officer stepped inside, eyes widening at the sight before him. His gaze snapped from Mitchell, sprawled on the floor, to Elena, standing over him. "Elena Carter?" the officer breathed. Mitchell blinked, still disoriented, his confusion morphing into horror as the realization set in. Did Mitchell just realize who he was messing with? And what will happen now that another officer has entered the scene? Keep watching, because things are about to take an even bigger turn. The woman he had just assaulted wasn't just anyone. She was Special Agent Elena Carter. And now, the game had changed. The store was frozen in silence, the weight of the moment pressing down like a storm waiting to break. Mitchell groaned, struggling to push himself up, his dazed expression flickering between anger and disbelief. His world had just been turned upside down. The second officer, Sergeant James Reynolds, took a cautious step forward, scanning the scene. His gaze locked onto Elena, then flicked to Mitchell, still sprawled on the ground, his hand inches from his holster. The tension in the air was suffocating. "Elena Carter?" Reynolds repeated, his tone laced with something between shock and realization. Mitchell's breathing turned shallow. His mind raced, piecing together the nightmare he had just walked into. Elena Carter wasn't just some random woman in a convenience store. She was Special Agent Elena Carter, FBI. The color drained from Mitchell's face. Elena dusted off her sleeves, her expression unreadable. She had dealt with threats before, but never had she been so personally targeted in such an open display of abuse of power. She had given Mitchell every chance to back down. He hadn't. And now, his reckoning had begun. She turned to Reynolds, her voice steady and sharp. "Sergeant, I assume you have body cams running?" Reynolds swallowed hard, nodding. "Yes, ma'am." "Good," she said coldly. "Because your officer just committed assault and unlawful detainment in front of multiple witnesses. And I will ensure that the footage makes it exactly where it needs to go." Mitchell scrambled to his feet, his pride barely holding him together. This isn't what it looks like," he stammered, his voice trembling with desperation. "I was just—" Elena cut him off with a stare so sharp it could have sliced through steel. "Just what? Profiling me? Abusing your badge?" She took a slow step forward, watching him shrink under the weight of her authority. "Tell me, Officer Mitchell, do you treat all civilians like criminals, or just the ones who don't fit your idea of who belongs?" The store remained deathly silent. The man who had defended her, now emboldened, spoke up. "We all saw what happened. You're finished, man." Mitchell turned to Reynolds, desperate for an ally, but the sergeant's face was unreadable. Then, slowly, he pulled out his radio. "This is Sergeant Reynolds," he said into the mic, "requesting immediate internal review. We have a situation." Elena didn't smile, didn't gloat. She only watched as Mitchell's world began to crumble. This wasn't over. It was just beginning. The air in the store was thick with tension, the weight of the moment pressing down on everyone. Sergeant Reynolds's radio crackled, the dispatcher's voice barely registering over the pounding heartbeat in Mitchell's ears. "Copy that, Sergeant. Officers en route." Mitchell's hands clenched into fists at his sides. His face, once twisted with arrogance, was now pale, his confidence shattered. He had spent years walking into rooms like he owned them, exerting control over people who couldn't fight back. But this time, he had picked the wrong target. Elena Carter was no ordinary citizen. She took a slow, deliberate step toward him, her piercing gaze locking him in place. "You should have thought this through, officer," she said, her voice cold and precise. "Because now, you're going to have to answer for every single person you've treated like this." Mitchell opened his mouth, his mind scrambling for an excuse, a way out. But there was nothing. The cashier spoke up next, his voice shaking but clear. "I saw everything. He grabbed her for no reason. He was out of control." The older woman near the entrance clutched her phone, her eyes sharp with determination. "I recorded the whole thing. If anyone needs proof, I have it." Mitchell turned slowly, looking at the growing number of witnesses who now stood against him. His usual tactics, the intimidation, the unchecked power, meant nothing here. The distant sound of sirens cut through the thick silence. Sergeant Reynolds exhaled heavily, his expression grim. "Mitchell, hand me your badge and gun." Mitchell flinched. "Sarge, you can't be serious." "You assaulted an FBI agent, and we both know this isn't your first misconduct report," Reynolds interrupted. "You're done." Mitchell's face twisted into something desperate, his last grasp at power slipping through his fingers. Elena didn't say another word. She only watched as Mitchell's hands trembled while he unfastened his badge, dropping it into Reynolds's waiting palm. The once powerful officer was now just a man stripped of everything he had used to control others. As the approaching police cars flooded the store with red and blue lights, Elena turned toward the witnesses, their quiet courage standing taller than any badge ever could. Justice had begun. But Elena knew this was only the first step. What do you think? Did Mitchell get what he deserved? Or was this just the beginning of something bigger? Let us know in the comments. And if you enjoyed this story, don't forget to subscribe, hit the like button, and share it with others who need to see it.